Gary Anthony Ramsey with your Our News Now Rewind. Stories making headlines for the week ending January 15th, 2011. Our top stories include: the president calls for healing in the wake of a deadly shooting that killed 6 people and left an Arizona congresswoman in critical condition. An intern who rushed to Representative Gabrielle Giffords' aid is being hailed as a hero. A former homeless man with a golden voice finds internet fame, fortune, and rehab. A year after a catastrophic earthquake in Haiti, millions remain homeless and hopeless. The people of the Sudan vote in an election that could create a new African nation. And a newspaper points a finger in the 46-year-old Louisiana murder case. A U.S. Congresswoman opens her eyes and is responsive to verbal commands less than a week after she is shot in the head by a lone gunman who went on to kill 6 people, including a federal judge and a 9-year-old girl. Representative Gabrielle Giffords opened both eyes, moving her arms and legs, and is undergoing intense physical therapy, according to her doctors at University Medical Center in Tucson. They said the congresswoman was rubbing her eyes and yawning, and that her eyes could also track people's movements, a sign that she can see. Meanwhile, suspect Jared Lee Loughner remains behind bars without bail after being arraigned on federal murder and attempted murder charges. The 22-year-old who fired a 9mm Glock at Giffords and a crowd at a Tucson mall has said nothing to investigators. He has since been assigned an attorney that was also involved in the Oklahoma City bombing case. Loughner has a history of mental illness, and so far it appears he has no ties to any political movement. Across the country, however, many have discussed the possibility that hateful political rhetoric may have helped create the atmosphere that led to the shooting. Thousands gathered at a memorial service for the victims, and during the service, President Barack Obama said this should be a time for healing in America.
It's important for us to pause for a moment and make sure that we're talking with each other in a way that heals, not in a way that wounds.
The president also praised the actions of Daniel Hernandez, an intern of Congresswoman Giffords, who ran to her side to give her first aid, despite the fact that the gunman was shooting people on her staff who were standing right next to her.
Although I appreciate the sentiment, I must humbly reject the use of the word hero, because I am not one. The people that are the heroes are people like Pam Simon, Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords.
All Arizona judges have recused themselves from this case. Loughner is likely to face the death penalty. In Knoxville, Tennessee, history is made as that city has its first black mayor after a special election. Daniel Brown was elected by city council members to replace former Mayor Bill Hazlett, who became the governor of Tennessee. Brown is a native of Knoxville and a retired U.S. postal worker. Brown has only been a councilman in the city for the past 13 years, but he'll remain mayor until the end of the year, pending the outcome of the next election in the fall. An Ohio man who was homeless just a few weeks ago is now riding a roller coaster ride of fame and fortune. This happens after an Ohio newspaper puts up his image and voice on YouTube. Ted Williams was panhandling on a street corner a few weeks ago when a reporter recorded this exchange.
Say something with that great radio voice.
When you're listening to nothing but the best of oldies, you're listening to Magic 98.9. Thank you so much. God bless you. Thank you. And we'll be back with more right after these words. And don't forget, tomorrow morning is your chance to win a pair of tickets to see this man live in concert.
Well, since then, Williams has been on news and talk shows and has been offered a slew of jobs, but the exposure hasn't all been good. Williams and his daughter were detained by the LAPD after a loud argument outside of a hotel room. He was reunited with his estranged family after 20 years for a taping of the Dr. Phil show. On that show, his doctor claimed that he's not as sober as he's claimed to be. After that show, Dr. Phil announced that the 53-year-old Williams is going into a drug and alcohol treatment facility to deal with his addiction. Well, a nationwide debate sparked this week over the use of the N-word in literature. This happened because a publisher has announced that the classic Huckleberry Finn will be republished without using that word at all. Published in 1885 and written by Mark Twain, the novel uses the N-word 219 times. The publisher of this new version says the use of the word is antiquated, but some scholars disagree.
We have to have the discussion about it. We can't skate over it. If you're going to move forward, there's going to be some agitation, right? You want to make sure that you're going to kind of disturb the equilibrium at least a little bit, or else there's not going to be any growth.
Some groups are calling the new version of the classic a form of censorship, while others are praising it, since this version will be acceptable to be read in some schools where Huck Finn was previously banned. In your Our News Now World Wrap, 1 year after the devastating earthquake that killed more than 300,000 people in Haiti, millions still remain homeless and continue to wait for a rebuilding process that seems mired in international apathy and local politics. The anniversary was marked with violence as protesters clashed with police in confrontations that have led to at least one death. The unrest seems related to the continuing crisis over who will lead the country. Last year's election was marred with accusations of fraud. A second-round runoff could include as much as 12 candidates for president. In the last year, Haitians have also had to deal with a deadly cholera outbreak that killed thousands of people and a hurricane that killed even more. An election in the Sudan could create a new African nation, but will it quell decades of deadly violence? More than 2 million people have died in the 22-year-long civil war, which pitted light-skinned Arab Islamic rulers in the north against the South's dark-skinned animists and Christians. The violence still rages as votes are counted. Northern factions are arming sympathizers in the South. That's where the majority of Sudan's valuable oil reserves are. In Louisiana, a 46-year-old murder still haunts a small town there where a black businessman was killed allegedly by members of the Ku Klux Klan. Well, now a newspaper is pointing the finger at one man who it says was there that night in 1964. Frank Morris was a cobbler who served blacks and whites in the town. On December 10th of 1964, his shop was set on fire with him inside. 2 FBI investigations failed to get any convictions in the case, but now the Concordia Sentinel says that truck driver Arthur Spencer was one of the men who were at the store that night. He's denied the allegation, but interviews with his former wife, his son, and one other person have implicated him in the crime. Spencer does admit that he was a member of the Klan during that time. The FBI says it's reviewing the case again and will speak to the people involved in the story. And finally, when she was born, William McKinley was president, and there were not yet 50 states in the U.S. But after 113 years of life, Mississippi Wynn has passed away. She was the oldest recording living black person on the planet, according to a group that tracks genealogy, and was believed to be the last person alive in the U.S. whose parents were born into slavery. Wynn lived in Shreveport, Louisiana, and was a domestic worker most of her life. The oldest living African-American title now belongs to Mamie Reardon of Edgefield, South Carolina, who is 112. For a complete look at any of the stories you've seen on The Rewind, remember, as always, go to the bottom of the webpage, find the link of the story you'd like to see, and click your way through. Now, that's your Our News Now Rewind for this week. I'm Gary Anthony Ramsey. We wish you all the best in 2011 and beyond.